The Colosseum of 10,000 suns shimmered in the void, its metallic tears orbiting a dying star like petals of celestial flower. Billions watched through holoscreens across the galaxy as the next Challenger's vessel drifted toward the docking bay. It was an unremarkable craft by galactic standards, small, battered, and clearly of primitive design. Yet curiosity had already turned into anticipation. The arena's commentators whispered with glee. A human was coming. No one had ever seen one fight before. When the ramp hissed open, a single figure descended into the light. He wore armor of tempered steel rather than plasma mesh, the surface etched with battle scars and crude engravings. A hood shadowed his face, and across his back hung a double-bladed axe that seemed almost ceremonial compared to the sleek weapons of the galaxy's elite warriors. His steps were steady, unhurried. The hum of the docking lights cast reflections across his armor as if the arena itself were testing his resolve. "Name," demanded the intake officer, a gelatinous being whose form flickered in shades of blue. "Aric Turner," the human replied. His voice was low, even, carrying a gravity that silenced the hum of nearby machinery. The officer blinked, uncertain how to categorize this stranger. Species, human. Homeworld, Earth. Occupation, soldier, Aric said simply. The word hung in the air, alien and ancient all at once. Most fighters in the arena were born for combat. Engineered, trained since larval stages, or bred from warrior castes. The human's tone suggested something different. It carried history, loss, necessity. Outside the chamber, a group of veteran gladiators gathered to watch. They towered over Aric, scaled brutes, multi-eyed predators, shimmering psionics whose mere presence warped the air. To them, the newcomer looked fragile, an antique relic stepping into a world of gods. "Is it true he's from an unregistered world?" one whispered. "They call it Earth," said another. "Barely out of its gravity well. Their weapons use combustion and metal projectiles." Laughter rippled through the group, sharp and dismissive. Aric ignored them. He approached a console where his registration was being processed. A cold voice emanated from the machine. "Combat record required. Upload verification of prior engagements." He placed his hand on the scanner. The console blinked, hesitated, then emitted a harsh electronic tone. The clerk frowned and struck the panel. The display filled with erratic symbols before settling on a line of text in glaring crimson. Confirmed combat fatalities, 200. Silence spread like a contagion. Even the hum of the star outside seemed to fade. The clerk looked up, its amorphous features trembling. There must be an error. Aric said nothing. The veterans leaned closer, disbelief twisting into unease. 200? That's impossible. Not simulated kills. Real deaths. The console pulsed again, verifying. Confirmed. Whispers filled the docking bay. The word deathworld surfaced among the murmurs, a term used for planets so hostile that survival alone was an act of violence. Suddenly, the laughter stopped. Aric adjusted the strap on his shoulder and turned toward the open archway leading into the arena's preparation corridors. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, as though the revelation meant nothing. Yet beneath the hood, his eyes flicked briefly toward the gladiators watching him. There was no arrogance there, only a quiet acknowledgement, a warning, perhaps, or resignation. One of the alien fighters, a serpentine champion named Kareth, slithered forward, her voice a low hiss. "You fought 200 battles and lived." "Not battles," Aric replied. "People." The word struck like a blade. Kareth recoiled, unsettled not by the number, but by the human's calm. As he disappeared into the corridor, the arena lights dimmed in reverence or fear. Somewhere deep within the control chamber, betting algorithms recalculated odds. The crowd beyond, sensing a shift they didn't yet understand, leaned closer to their screens. A primitive had arrived in their sacred arena, and suddenly, none were certain who the predator truly was. The revelation of Aric's kill count spread through the Colosseum's networks with the speed of panic. By the time he reached the inner corridors, Entire wings of the arena had fallen into a hushed electric tension. Screens displayed frozen frames of his registration data, each viewer wondering how such a small, quiet being could have accumulated such a brutal history. Spectators leaned closer, not out of eagerness for bloodshed, but from a dawning curiosity about the planet that had forged him. Even the arena's guards, bred for stoic vigilance, kept their gazes lowered when he passed. Yet Aric walked with the same steady cadence, as if his past were merely a burden he had grown accustomed to carrying. In the council chamber above the arena floor, the gladiatorial overseers convened in a semicircle of hovering seats. Their forms varied wildly: crystalline carapaces, translucent membranes, armored shells, but each radiated authority. At the center stood High Warden Jorix, her exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial polish. She activated the holographic replay of Aric's scan, and the crimson text appeared once more. None spoke for several seconds. "The number cannot be accurate," muttered a counselor with spined limbs and a quivering jaw. "Humans are scarcely beyond primitive warfare. How could one accumulate such lethality without advanced weaponry?" Another counselor answered, adjusting the ridges along their skull. "Perhaps the violence of his world makes technology unnecessary. There are worlds where survival demands constant confrontation." Jorix observed the display longer than the rest. The calm in Aric's face fascinated her. It was the expression of someone intimately familiar with conflict, yet unburdened by the need to boast. "Regardless of origin," she said, "the Count is verified. We must decide whether he presents a danger we cannot contain." The discussion spiraled into competing fears and ambitions. Some argued for immediate removal, citing the risk of allowing an unpredictable species into an arena filled with dignitaries. Others saw opportunity. A fighter so enigmatic could draw unprecedented viewership. A few questioned whether he would even survive his first match, suggesting the galaxy's greatest champions would quickly expose the limits of human fortitude. Meanwhile, Aric waited in the preparation chamber, sitting on a bench meant for warriors twice his size. He rested his axe across his knees and methodically tightened the leather wrapping on its handle. The corridor lights flickered with each passing tremor of the arena's machinery, but he seemed unbothered by the metallic echoes. A nearby attendant, a slim figure with bioluminescent veins, gathered the courage to speak. "You are not afraid?" they asked softly. Aric glanced up, his eyes unreadable. "Fear is normal," he said, "but it doesn't change anything." The attendant considered this, unfamiliar with the plainness of his wisdom. There was no bravado in his tone, no hunger for glory, only necessity. As they retreated, they found themselves wondering whether the humans' world created warriors of burden rather than pride. Back in the chamber above, the council reached its decision. They would allow Aric to compete, but his first trial would be against high-ranking combatants, fighters whose reputations were built on years of surviving the arena's most perilous challenges. It was both a test and a safeguard. If he faltered, the threat would resolve itself. If he prevailed, they would adapt. Jorix delivered the verdict to the control systems, her mandibles pressed tightly in contemplation. Something about the human's silent weight unsettled her, though she could not yet name the reason. As Aric stood upon receiving the signal to proceed, a faint ripple of energy coursed through the arena, as if the structure itself sensed what was coming. He lifted his weapon, secured the strap across his chest, and stepped toward the entrance gate. Though the council believed they had prepared for every outcome, none anticipated that their greatest concern would soon shift from what Aric might do to what he might reveal about them. The arena gates parted with a grinding resonance, revealing a vast expanse of metallic earth lit by a dome of swirling nebulae. Aric stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the grid, and listened as the roar of the crowd coalesced into something almost tangible. They weren't cheering for him specifically. They were cheering for the unknown. He could feel their expectations pressing against his shoulders like a physical weight, but he remained centered, his grip steady on the axe that had followed him through darker places than this. Across the battleground, the first challenger emerged. The creature towered above the crowd, its skin plated with obsidian ridges, its 4 arms each tipped with hooked claws. It moved with a predatory confidence, assured that the match had already been decided. Aric noted the stride, the pattern of breaths, the slight delay in its upper left limb, a weakness. Not arrogance, not malice, but practicality shaped his observations. He did not relish the encounter. He assessed it. As the creature circled, he recognized the same instinctive tension he had seen back on Earth during the worst nights of conflict. Survival was the common language of killers. When the fight began, it was not the spectacle the announcers expected. There were no grand declarations, only the quick, efficient exchanges of two beings who understood that hesitation was fatal. Aric moved with an economy of motion that baffled the audience. Each shift of weight, each measured strike flowed seamlessly into the next. The creature struck with overwhelming strength, but its brutality lacked the refinement that Aric had learned through years of necessity rather than training. A well-timed pivot, a decisive blow, and the giant fell with a reverberating thud. The crowd erupted, startled not by the victory, but by the simplicity of it. Aric stood over the fallen fighter, breathing steadily. Instead of finishing the creature, he stepped back, refusing to deliver a final strike. The arena's protocols allowed him the right, but he recognized fear in the creature's eyes, and something within him refused the easy path. That decision sent a shockwave through the watchers. Some interpreted it as mercy, others mistook it for insolence. Aric understood it only as a refusal to add another death to the tally that already haunted him. The second challenger was dispatched with similar efficiency, though Aric again declined to end its life. By the third victory, speculation blazed across the arena's networks. The crowds leaned forward, their earlier fear morphing into fascination. The council members watched from their chamber, exchanging glances that flickered with unease. They had expected violence. They had not expected control. For many, Aric's restraint was more unsettling than his lethality. In the competitors' lounge, the other gladiators reacted in scattered waves. Some admired him openly, impressed by the precision he displayed against foes far larger and more adapted to the arena's environment. Others viewed him with suspicion, uncertain whether his calm masked a deeper, more dangerous nature. Kareth approached him later, her serpentine form coiled in a gesture of respect. "You could have ended them," she whispered. "Why didn't you?" Aric cleaned a smear of dark ichor from his axe before answering. "Surviving someone doesn't mean you need to destroy them." The statement left her silent. In the arena, mercy was rare enough to be mistaken for strategy. Yet Aric's tone held no calculation, no deceit. It was simply truth. As he was summoned for the next phase of competition, the hum of the arena shifted, as though the structure were acknowledging his presence differently now. Spectators leaned forward, sensing a change they could not quite define. Aric adjusted his armor and walked toward the rising gate, his shadow stretching across the metallic floor. Whatever came next, he knew the arena was beginning to understand him, and that understanding might prove more dangerous than any opponent so far. The arena dimmed until only a narrow beam of pale light illuminated the center platform, drawing every gaze to the massive figure already waiting there. The reigning champion stood motionless, his armor composed of interlocking plates that shimmered like volcanic glass. A heavy crest extended from his skull, etched with the victories of a lifetime spent fighting. His name, Vac, was spoken across star systems with reverence. Aric had watched only a single recording of the champion, but even that brief glimpse had revealed a disciplined, intelligent warrior. Now, meeting him in person, Aric sensed neither malice nor arrogance. Instead, Vac radiated a quiet certainty that reminded Aric of the best soldiers he had known. People who had survived not because they wanted to conquer, but because they refused to fall. The two met at the platform's center, stopping an arm's length apart. There were no theatrics, no taunts. Vac inclined his head slightly, acknowledging Aric's earlier victories. "Human," he rumbled, his voice resonating through the metal beneath them. You fight with clarity. That is rare. Aric nodded. You do too. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, but the words dissolved into meaningless thunder. Aric focused on Dravac's stance, the angle of his shoulders, the tiny shift in weight that revealed his readiness. When the signal finally sounded, the world seemed to contract in emotion and instinct. Dravac advanced with startling speed for his size, his armored fists generating shockwaves as they struck the ground. Aric evaded the first blow by inches, feeling the air ripple past his ear. He retaliated with a sweeping arc of his axe, but the champion intercepted it with a gauntlet forearm, redirecting the strike rather than meeting it head-on. Sparks scattered across the platform as metal scraped against alien alloy. The crowd roared, though neither fighter registered it. The champion's precision forced Aric to draw on every lesson hard-won in the chaos of Earth's battlegrounds. He used the terrain, stepping behind pillars and deliberately shifting the rhythm of his movements. Dravac adapted quickly, countering each tactic with one of his own. The duel unfolded like a dialogue written in blows, feints, and near misses. Aric felt the strain in his muscles and the burn of exertion in his lungs. Yet he also felt a strange exhilaration. Dravac wasn't merely testing him. He was measuring him, as if trying to decide what kind of man stood before him. Midway through the battle, the champion managed to knock Aric off balance, sending him sliding across the metallic surface. The crowd gasped as Dravac closed in for what should have been the decisive strike. But Aric, driven by instinct more than intent, rolled aside and swung upward, knocking the champion's arm off its killing trajectory. Dravac paused, glancing at the dent in his gauntlet before looking back at Aric with something that resembled respect. Their weapons locked, their breaths synchronized for a moment, and Aric realized the champion did not desire his death. Dravac wanted acknowledgement, proof that Aric understood the weight of what victory meant. With a decisive maneuver, Aric wrenched free and brought his axe to Dravac's throat. The champion froze, perfectly still. The stadium erupted in anticipation of the final blow. Yet Aric stepped back, lowering his weapon. No, he said quietly. This doesn't have to end that way. Dravac straightened, his massive chest rising with a slow breath. Then he raised his arm toward the audience, signaling surrender. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat before erupting with a sound so immense it shook the upper tiers. In the council chamber, Jorix stared at the display in astonishment. A human had changed the outcome not through force, but through restraint. Aric had won, and rewritten the expectations of the arena. As he left the platform, the path ahead felt uncertain. Yet for the first time in years, Aric sensed possibility rather than inevitability. Whatever came next, it would not be shaped by his kill count, but by the choices he made from here on.